Productive Disruption is a podcast presented by Rhodes Branding, spotlighting bold and innovative ideas that have the ability to reshape K-12 education. If you're looking for actionable ideas about how to operate and innovate your school, you've come to the right place. Let's get started.
Hello, welcome to Productive Disruption. My name is John Loveday. I'm the VP of Innovation and Growth at Rhodes Branding.
And I'm Jennifer Tausch. I'm the VP of Creative here at Rhodes Branding.
Today's episode is Call Me Mr. Today we have Dr. Roy Jones, who is the founder of Call Me Mr. We also have Mark Joseph, who is an alumni of the Call Me Mr. program. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Dr. Jones, we'll start with you. So tell our listeners a little bit about the Call Me Mr. program. First of all, where'd you get the name? And what is the brief history of this program?
Wonderful. Thank you for the question. The Call Me Mr. program was, in fact, founded at Clemson University. At the time, it was among a group of professors and officials at Clemson that did research in recognizing that there was a shortage, a significant shortage of African American males teaching at the early child, elementary level in South Carolina. And it was in comparison to the idea or the fact that there was 65% of our incarcerated prison population was made up of Black and brown men, compared to the shortage of Black males, which only represented 1% of the entire teacher corps in South Carolina among elementary teachers. Put it in specific numbers, we're talking 20,000 teachers serving in 600 elementary schools in South Carolina. So doing quick arithmetic, that's 200 Black men teaching in South Carolina public schools in 2000. Clemson certainly didn't feel they could do anything about the prison population, but the researchers felt that it could do something about addressing the shortage of African American men teaching in South Carolina public schools. At the time, I was actually dean of education at Claflin University in Orangeburg. We were one of the three historically Black colleges and universities, or HBCUs, Claflin University being one, Morris College being another, and Benedict College being a third, that collaborated with Clemson to launch the Call Me Mr. initiative back in 2000 to, in fact, address this shortage of Black men teaching at the elementary level. So it started with these four institutions, Clemson being the flagship, doing the marketing, the promotion, the fundraising, the research, combining with the three HBCUs that have had history in addressing and attracting the recruiting and the retention, the development of Black male teachers in South Carolina. So that was the collaboration. It was felt that this collaboration could, in fact, be effective in addressing the shortage.
Incredible. And Mark, I know that you were one of the earlier graduates of this program. What year did you graduate from the Call Me Mr. program?
I graduated Call Me Mr. in 2004. And yes, you are correct. I was a part of the first cohort inducted into the Call Me Mr. program, and the first graduating cohort that ended up graduating from Claflin University in 2004.
And back in 2004, could you have imagined in 2021 this program would grow to where it is now?
Not at all. I think at the time in 2000, when we started, we have an infamous photo where we're all gathered together at the South Carolina State Museum. And that's all of the gentlemen that and had enrolled and called me Mr. at the time. And every time I look at that particular image in that photo, I never would have imagined where we are today based upon that time frame in 2000. I mean, it's remarkable. When we talk about the longevity of this program, all the remarkable things this program has been able to accomplish. But clearly, in the year 2000, it was never on my radar.
I gotta see a copy of that picture now. I'm really curious to what
Yeah,
that looked like.
me too. Yep. So, what's the success rate of your students that convert into the teaching sector, and how long do they typically stay? Because we know that it tends to get cut short about the third year for most teachers. So, do you guys have any of those numbers yet?
Well, yeah, we can share some, again, keeping in mind that initially the initial focus was to address the shortage, because the shortage of teachers was so significant that something needed to be there needed to be a strategy in place that would address this shortage. So, in terms of the short term objective and goal, it was to really just getting Black males into the profession, and getting them um, uh, certified, degreed, and prepared to go into the field. That was significant. So, in a longitudinal, long range objective, would be to address student impact, student achievement of the young men once they're out there, which doesn't happen overnight. So you think about when Mr. Joseph entered into Call Me Mr. in 2000. It takes him 4 years to get his degree and get certified. Then it's going to take him another 4 years to create a track record of impacting student achievement. So keeping that in mind, how many years it takes to incubate the program, incubate the students, to prepare them to go into the field. That said, when you fast forward now 20, going on 22 years, looking back from 2004, from 2004, and Mr. Joseph class graduated, 85% of our misters that graduated since 2004 right up to last year are still teaching in South Carolina public schools. 12% are either principals or assistant principals in South Carolina public schools, and 1% are serving as professors, actually engaged in the preparation of teachers and teacher education programs in South Carolina colleges. That is far away ahead of the national norm for data collect for the retention of teachers going into teaching. That misters far exceed the national average on that, which we're very proud of regarding that at the elementary, early child, middle grade level. So that's it. Now we're just beginning to see impact on student achievement. Our misters have become teachers of the year at the local district school level, at the district level, even at the state level, and as a result of their success, they're showing data that isn't readily available. I might say it's taken a bit to uncover this data, but on an individual level, we know of individual cases where misters have had profound impact on student achievement. We have one example of a mister who is taught and is now and had been a teacher, teacher and a principal, that within 2 years led his whole school from scoring below average on state mandated exams in the failure level to actually moving them in 2 years to over 90% on that same school with the same teachers and the same children and the same teachers in community that he was serving. So we've got examples of that. In fact, the results were so remarkable that the test results had to be recounted several times to be sure that they weren't fraudulent. But it proved to be legitimate. So we know That is an outstanding example, but we know there are several individual classroom examples where student achievement has been impacted and influence of the misters within their schools have been impacted. Mark Joseph is an example himself for having been a teacher, assistant principal, a principal, and served on the college level. So we have clear evidence of young men that have come out of our state, because we don't recruit misters from every place in the country to come here and save us. Misters, 90% of our misters come from South Carolina soil, from South Carolina communities, and giving back to these same communities.
Wow, that's powerful. Then,
That's fantastic.
as a former teacher myself, I remember in my first few years in the teaching profession, looking around in that school building, and there were only, of course, a handful of men in that building. Um, nationwide, of course, men make up around 25% of the teaching profession nationwide. And of course, as you guys know, African American males make up only around 2 or 3% nationwide. And so, um, but to hear the success of your misters and how many 85% are still teaching. They're still principals. They're still in the education
That's
field.
fantastic.
It's incredible. And
Phenomenal.
Mark, I'd love to know, what do you think are a couple of key elements that make this program work? Because to have 85+% of your graduates still engaged in the education sector is powerful. And clearly, you guys are doing something right.
I would agree to that. And I would speak to two things in particular. And these are not the only two things that I think that we talk about is the secret sauce of Mister. But these are two important elements in terms of when we talk about the recruitment and the retention efforts. The first one is about purpose, understanding and knowing your why. One of the things that we talk about, frequently as freshmen, sophomore, all throughout this program, and even after graduation, is to understand why you have chosen this particular profession, and understand that your why, your purpose, has to be so far greater than your individual or personal accomplishment or drive. It has to be something greater than yourself, because it can't always just simply be about you. And so we talk about the importance of figuring out and understanding your why. And once we're in a particular position to understand that this journey that we're on is so far greater than just you, you have people who really begin to understand that this journey and the things that I'm experiencing is so important and so bigger than just me. This thing is about the many students who look to me for guidance. This is about the parents who I'm able to impact, that's connected to these students. It's about the communities where I come from, or the communities where the students are coming from. So it's just not about you and your own desires. And again, and I say that not to be dismissive of the individuals that go through this journey, but we all have to begin to understand that this calling that we're referring to, in terms of talking about becoming not just a teacher, but an educator, it has to be about something just far greater than yourself. And the second element that I would like to talk about is just relationships. When we talk about the foundational pieces of this Call Me Mr. program, is steeped in understanding relationships. John Maxwell talks about that one is too small a number to achieve greatness, and that anything that is worth doing, anything that is worthwhile accomplishing, it has to be done with the partnership, with the connectivity and the collaboration of someone else. And so earlier on within our program, we're in the dorms together, we're living together, we're in classes together, we are studying together, we are learning about one another. And so we're going through this entire Call Me Mr. experience, but we're quickly understanding that I'm not on this journey by myself. I have a team of individuals that share the same fire, passion, desire to be a change agent, to be a difference maker. And we're on this journey together. Now, we may come from different walks of life, we may come from different communities, but we're on this same journey together. And again, when it's all said and done, it has to be about improving the educational experiences of the young people that we're serving. And so when we constantly talk about and look at those two elements, that's where our guys stick and stay. That's why our guys want to continuously be a part of this Call Me Mr. movement, because they have figured out their why. They have figured out that this journey is so much bigger than myself. And there have been elements and experiences along the way that have confirmed that. And with that in mind, we understand the value, the importance of relationships. And I can't tell you how often and how important relationships are. And you all know, just as even in the industry you're in, you can't really get anything done without the reality and experience of a relationship, and an authentic relationship. Not someone that someone's trying to get something that you have, but someone who was truly invested in your success, in your growth. That's what this program has been about. From day one, we've had individuals from our administrative team that have invested in our lives. They have committed themselves to see our own growth. They have, committed themselves to see us grow and develop as young men, as educators. And as a result, we have turned to one another and invested and committed ourselves to do the same with one another. So, again, I would say knowing your why, your purpose, and establishing those relationships.
That's fantastic. Thank you. That's great. So, do you guys have thoughts on a retention strategy in the post-COVID world, knowing that we've got a bit of a teacher shortage? Is there any maybe ideas or thoughts that you guys could put out there to help solve the teacher shortage and retain the great talent that we have now?
Wow, that's a pretty heavy one. Do we have a magic wand we could use? It's a great question. It's a tough one. I'll pick up on where Mr. Joseph just left off, because you cannot emphasize enough how powerful a commitment is when someone has a purpose and a mission that goes beyond just being a teacher in a job. We talk about, what a mister's responsibility to family, to community, to uh, to the as well as their profession. That if they stand in the gap of making a difference between not just themselves, for themselves, but a difference in enriching and developing the lives of everyone around them, including their family, their friends, their relatives, and their community. So it raises the standard, if you will, from just one of you know holding on to my job, and staying in a school. It's you step away and you're going to let a whole lot of people down, and nobody else is going to necessarily be there to step in your place. So that's a message that resonates throughout the Call Me Mr. program, as long as they're in the program for years, and we are continually able to communicate that in so many ways on an individual basis within our cohort structure, which is part of what makes Mr. Run, is having this cohort and building these authentic relationships first within the community, and beyond. That our misters have learned how to build the relationships, communicate with parents, with community, with their colleagues, and with authority in ways that they may have come through their K-12 experience in early life, they that didn't necessarily learn well, and with few exceptions. So So we're basically, Jennifer, raising the standard. Misters are operating on a different standard, setting a standard. So the four-letter word that you won't find with Mister is quit. That's really not an option. Quit to do what? Quit to leave what? I mean, quitting is not really something we we encourage at the first sign of trouble. And yeah, pandemic is more than your typical average trouble. But if you look at, as we look at across our experience among misters, we've had very few that have left the profession because of the pandemic. In fact, we've got more examples of how they've used their gifts and talent to respond effectively to the pandemic to ensure that their students get the best of what they have to offer.
That's
That's the
fantastic. That's great
difference.
to hear.
Yeah, couple of things I wanted to add as well. One of the things that we also go through, especially during the 4 year window of this program, is we're always confronted with some particular challenge, some kind of external challenge, whether it's something that we brought upon ourselves or just life's challenges, of its own. But the thing that's really pressed upon us is how do you collectively come up with solutions to begin to move forward. And I think because many of our guys have gone through so many different challenges, during that 4 year window, when they're confronted with a scenario similar to the pandemic. And I say this because there's nothing that would have prepared anyone to deal with the pandemic. But the thing that you're used to is I dealt with some level of challenge. And so my duty and responsibility is how do we find ways to create and find solutions. And so that's one aspect that our guys are going through. But I think the other thing that we have really started to put in place is points of connectivity. We understand for many of our guys that's current practitioners, we still bring them back into what we call the Call Me Mr. Fold, whether it's through our summer leadership, our summer internship experience, where they actually get to service and help our pre-service teachers, whether it's our leadership institute during the summer, where they get to hear other speakers, where they really get to become re-energized. Because the typical school year can be taxing, it can be draining. But again, when you're in that particular environment where you see other individuals that have gone through similar experiences, that have gone through similar challenges, and it becomes a reality of I don't want to let them down as well because I know what they're going through. I don't want to. I know the experiences that they face and the challenges that they face. I don't want to let my fellow Call Me Mr. brothers down. I don't want to let my cohort members down. And so we've built into our program points of connectivity to where we have allowed them space to just voice where you are, the good, the bad, the ugly. Voice your victories, voice your celebrations, voice your challenges. And even in your challenges, there is some kind of answer or solution amongst this entire group. It may not come from one individual, but it comes from the entire Call Me Mr. network. So we depend heavily on, again, this Call Me Mr. cohort development because we feel like the answer or the solutions just can't come from one individual. It's going to come from this Call Me Mr. team, this Call Me Mr. approach. But we found how necessary and important it is to maintain those points of connectivity because again, what many educators and teachers are encountering, some people walk away feeling like they're alone, or they're by themselves, or they're not being heard, or their voices didn't go anywhere, or people are not listening. we've been able to create an environment to where, again, that we've allowed them to use and exercise their voice. We've helped them to understand that you're not alone in this journey. And as a result, it gives them that additional boost. It gives them that additional energy, and it gives them that thing that's been missing all along, that ends up, as Dr. Jones stated, that puts them in a position for them to make the decision, no, I'm not going to quit, I'm going to move forward.
Yeah, and that's well said, Mark.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, I think that we being educators broadly have relied too heavily in the recent past on goodwill. We want to recruit new educators, young people in college and go into this profession. We rely so much on just hoping that they wanted to do it for the right reasons and for goodwill. And of
Hmm.
course, I think, most educators are in it for the right reasons, and they have a purpose, like you mentioned. They have a purpose for doing what they do. But that's only one element in my mind to recruiting teachers
Yeah.
nationwide
Yeah.
to fill these positions, and not only to fill them but stay there. And so, and you guys have seen this for the first time in a very long time. We see billboards across this country that are offering teachers signing bonuses. We see school districts across the country that are offering to pay a car lease for teachers,
Mhm.
paying moving expenses for teachers. And it's refreshing to me, and I'm sure it is to you, to see that society as a whole, I think especially during this pandemic, have seen how vital educators
Yeah.
are.
That's right.
And when you don't have
Hmm.
them in places where they can be their best and support kids, it creates a lot of trouble. So,
That's right.
what can we do? Speaking of those efforts, what else can we do locally or really nationally to continue to recruit the right people to fill these positions, and also to support them to keep them there? Of course, more pay is an easy one, but beyond that, what else from y'all's perspective can we do to again recruit and retain teachers across the country?
Um, I know certainly Mr. Joseph has a perspective on that as well, which I'm sure he'll share. Um, I would say right off the start, the image of the profession has to change in the minds of communities, parents, and young people. That the branding, you talk about the incentives, which is certainly good, but part of the messaging about public school, for the most part across the board, has not been positive. Um, it's been a frightening kind of concern among many. There are also efforts, there are literally efforts made to, if they could, they would shut down public education. So we can't ignore that. And part of it is, the branding and the messaging has been poor. Um, and I think that's no one's fault, except that the profession has to bear responsibility for that, because where are you going to get your future teachers if you don't get them from your current classrooms? So you gotta, there's got to be a more of a commitment to be intentional, and being clear and focused on understanding that your future teachers are looking at you every single day. So you have them while they're a captive audience. You have the opportunity to help them develop the right kind of attitude toward in value toward the profession. We are challenged now. We hear STEM, STEM, STEM all the time now. But in South Carolina, STEM, STEM, STEM has to start with read, read, read. Start with write, write, write. It has to start with pass, test, pass, test. In a state that ranks at the bottom of the bottom in public education. So we have to be realistic about that. We have to be intentional. We have to be clear, and we have to have the right message. And no one can be what they don't see. So part of the value of Call Me Mister is Misters have a profile and have examples of young males, for example, that come out of these K-12 systems, and often underperforming systems, and have been successful. So although salary and money certainly is always a conversation, for many, a first year salary for a first year teacher is more money than their families made growing up. So you got to keep it in perspective. We're in South Carolina, generally a rural state, that that salary can be an issue, but it's not the only issue. But if you build the profession and you commit to the profession, it can actually become, you can make a decent wage, if you will, especially if you go through the ranks in the hierarchy of the profession. But with that, I'd like to hear Mr. Joseph's perspective as well, because there is things that we can do to bring about a more positive commitment to public education, which is where we live.
Yeah, a couple of things I would add to that, Dr. Jones, is and one of the things that we have been able to do, really by the support of many different organizations in the state legislature, is really figuring out how do we make higher education affordable, and especially the pathway to become educators. How do we make that affordable? And one of the things that we've been able to do is also to build that 2-year model where coming out of high school, we have a tuition assistance package for individuals who would like to pursue that 2-year approach and then transfer to one of our 4-year Call Me Mr. partners. But again, that affordability, I think, is an important piece, because when you make college affordable down the line, when it's time for you to graduate and you're in that teaching career path, again, you're not in a position having to pay or repay student loans and things of that nature, because you've created a true pathway of affordability specifically for the profession that's impacting all of the lives in our nation and definitely in our state. I would start with that. But another thing Dr. Jones talked about uh, really happens every single day in our classrooms, over 180 days. The best recruiter that any this profession could have is a teacher. What takes place during that 180-day time frame, with those day in and day out lived experiences and interactions from teacher to student, from principal to teacher, that particular dynamic that takes place over 180 days is the greatest recruiting effort that we could ever see. And I think it's extremely important that as educators that we do understand that we have to learn how to become true ambassadors of this profession. Because if we don't learn and see ourselves as true ambassadors, it's easy for our profession to go by the wayside. It's easy for people, again, to walk away from a K-12 experience and expressing, I want no more parts of this. I don't want any more parts of this school process. And so if we can begin impacting, changing our school dynamic, our school culture, our school experiences, I think we can truly impact those recruiting efforts and things of that nature. And also, the last piece I would like to add, and it's something that you all are doing that I really commend you on, is really taking the time to really talk about the winning educational stories. I think many people need to hear about the great things that's taking place in our school systems. There are so many great stories that takes place every single day that we don't know anything about. The general public, the community don't know anything about. And I think if we can begin to leverage whatever platform, source of media that we may have to begin to express and articulate these stories, these life-changing stories, I think people will begin to change their perception of the school system, of our educational process. And so I think we need more people to begin telling those powerful and life-changing educational stories. There are a lot of victories that took place today in so many different schools that go unheard. There are so many lives that have been changed just this day alone. And when we talk about, it doesn't have to be some major event or grand event that took place, but simply that educator who paid a outstanding compliment to a child, who gave that particular child encouragement during a particular phase that they didn't have the level of confidence to carry out a particular task. Again, those life-changing winning moments, I think our common general population need to hear more about those outstanding stories that takes place in our educational system.
I think that's well said, Mark. And that's exactly why we started this podcast. And that's why we called this podcast Productive Disruption, because we
Mm.
want to tell those stories nationwide that are happening day in and day out. And Dr. Jones, you said something that really stuck out to me. You said people can't be what they don't see. And I love that. That makes so much sense. And
Yeah, I
and
wrote
and
that down
kids
too.
need to
That's great.
see what it takes to go in this profession and to do it well. That's powerful.
It's true. It's very true. So, what is it about broadening out this program that is really the biggest challenge for you guys to re-implement this across the country in other schools? Do you guys have an onboarding process? How many schools have you already reached out to? Just because we really want to support this program as much as we possibly can, and obviously help and make sure that that other institutions are as lucky as Clemson is.
That's a great question, Jennifer. We started out establishing that we are in our 22nd year. We talked about the initial collaboration being among four institutions, with Clemson being the flagship with three HBCUs. Fast forward, we're now in 27 institutions in South Carolina, and we're in nine other states for over about 42 total institutions nationally. So we know the mission and the vision of Call Me Mister has resonated across the board, keeping in mind that was also the limitation initially was felt that it was to be concentrated at the HBCUs, when we realized that our model what resonated at HWCUs. So we're as effective at College of Charleston today as we are at Claflin. So understand that the model has embraced any environment that commits to the process and adopts it in the way that it should be, which is our co-curricular experience. It takes more than just the academic framework to develop a effective teacher in our mind, especially if you're talking about diversifying the teacher pipeline, because you have to understand what that diversity means. Not everybody's cut from the same cloth. Not everybody can be developed the same way. So when you're looking at diversifying, you have to understand who you're talking about, where they're coming from, and what their needs are. We're co-curricular, so we add a leadership dimension to our students' experience beyond their academic experience. And that's the case whether we're in Louisiana or whether we're in South Carolina or whether we're in Chicago. So that's the remarkable effort of Call Me Mister in its success. We did not, Jennifer, start out with expecting to expand. We started off with a vision or a belief that the model was worthy of expansion and growth. We didn't exactly know at the beginning how that would happen. And it took practice, engagement, successes, and starts and stops to develop it. So the onboarding, we've kind of got it kind of down now. We, for institutions that want to be part of Call Me Mister, there is a vetting process. We begin with understanding who they are, why they want the program, and we engage in site visitations. We engage in developing assessments to understand the institutions, and vice versa, for them to understand our program and what we are versus what we're not. You know, we're not set up to solve your diversity problem, though we address diversity. We're set up with the same mission we had 22 years ago, to address the shortage of African American males at the early child, elementary, middle grade level. With that hasn't changed. Now there's been successes that have been connected to that, and that's good. But we're pretty focused and very intentional about who we are and what we do, and we don't compromise that. We don't chase dollars. We don't chase rabbits. We don't, we're not expanded into high school yet because we don't have that capacity yet. So we're not trying to do that. Now, if we get more dollars and more personnel to address that particular issue, because it's a particular focus, that may change. But for 22 years, we're satisfied with that. Our focus has been a valuable focus, because we know if you don't build a foundation at the early level, where kids are coming out of elementary school reading and writing and doing math on grade level, what have you got? Dropout data, suspension, expulsion data suggests that students that aren't successful are, by the time they hit middle school, probably also aren't reading and writing and doing math on grade level. So we know the early challenge of foundational challenges, and we expect that we will continue to grow. Even as we speak, we have right now institutions that are on the table with inquiries about wanting to go forward, Call Me Mister, that range from the north to the south to the east and the west. So that's been remarkable, and we're certainly happy to see it. But we also are very clear in our mission, and what we do and what we think is important.
That's
Excellent.
incredible.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, 21 years of history, and here's a 21 more years. I know you guys will
That's right.
continue to make an
That's right.
impact nationwide. And gentlemen, we always end the podcast with the same question. I know it's broad and it's not always easy to answer. We're gonna give you the magic wand for a second. You got to hand it back though when you're done. But we're gonna let you borrow the wand, and you can wave it, and you can fix one thing about education in this country. K-12, higher ed, doesn't matter. Mark, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Dr. Jones.
Sounds good.
That's a tough one. Oh wow. That's a tough one. That's a challenge. I would say, probably off the top of my head, I would recreate the kind of structure where the families, the school, and the community are really truly working hand in hand to create life changing experiences for all of the students. And I guess I mean really and truly working hand in hand and servicing the needs of not only the students but the community, also the schools and the families, and it becomes a cycle, that takes place where everyone that's a part of this chain, that's a part of this pyramid, actually, that you know they are recipients of this strengthened relationship that's in place. I think if we're able to do that, if we're able to build that and strengthen that particular pyramid, I think it handles all these other things that we tend to see as issues in higher ed, in the greater society that we see. But if I had that magic wand, I would really strengthen that three-pronged approach of family, school, and community.
Yeah, I'm glad Mr. Joseph went first on that question. Um, I'll just say that one of the real miracles that we see every day and we experience in this country is that it is so pluralistic, and it is diverse. The diversity, the inclusion within the country um, has been really remarkable, like no other place in the world. Um, and the challenge of that development, transformation in our country is a particular concern for educators. And I totally agree with Mr. Joseph's uh, wanting to see that the changes he would like to see. And I would definitely want to see how educators are being developed differently, because I don't believe they're being prepared to meet the the demographic changes in our nation. And if anything, I would love to see and however it's delivered, however the system's delivered, and certainly Call Me Mister is one system in one way, but certainly a better job in our nation across the board in every institution that's responsible for developing educators, for producing educators, would like to see them come up with better ways, more effective ways to prepare our educators to meet this demographic change that we see in this country every single day.
Incredible.
Fantastic. Thank you.
We're going to go off script for just 1 second. So, gentlemen, you're at the University of Clemson. I'm an alumni of the University of South Carolina, and as we know,
Oh dear.
in just about a week and a half, we have the Palmetto Bowl. If you're from the Southeast, you know Clemson University and University of South Carolina are big in-state rivals, and so I'd love to hear your prediction for the
My
football
God.
game in
Not
about
doing
10
this.
days.
Are we on tape? This is a good day. You try that's a setup.
My prediction is South Carolina 14, Clemson 41.
Woo!
Okay.
Wow. Wow.
Ouch.
That's strong. That's strong.
Did you want an actual point prediction or you want a victory prediction?
Whatever answer you want to give us.
Whatever answer. Yeah, I think your Gamecocks are struggling mightily on offense.
I would
It's going to
agree.
be hard to meet that challenge against one of the best defenses in the nation. At the same time, our Tigers are also struggling against, as we can see this year. But I think has a better chance of overcoming that struggle. I don't think it's going to be as big a gap as Mr. Joseph suggests. I think it's going to be closer to a 30-14 kind of game.
We will,
I,
we will
I
see.
will. I will add. Let me add to this. I think you're witnessing the difference between the seasoned gentleman and Dr. Jones, and you heard his seasoned answer, but you heard the brashness,
That's right.
the
That's right. His
youngness,
was very
and
well thought out.
right, exactly. And you hear me. I just spewed out,
That's right.
the large gap in numbers, but
Yeah. That's great. That's
but I
great.
still I stick to my story.
Okay. All right. We'll hold
Well,
you
when we
to
have
it.
you guys on next time the
That's
podcast, we'll
right.
have to revisit this and we'll
Yes,
see
we'll
how
have
it
to
played
revisit.
out. So there we go.
That's right.
Well, gentlemen, we
Fantastic.
appreciate your time. If someone wanted to learn more about Call Me Mister, where could they go and how could they not only learn more, but how could they support this program?
They can send an email to Mr. at Clemson.edu. Any email, any information they would like could come into that general box to us. If they wanted to make a contribution, uh, anonymous or otherwise, they can contact our Clemson University Foundation and indicate they want to make a contribution specific to Call Me Mister, and they would be they would have a favorable response there. And if they want to contact us or have a question for either Mr. Joseph or I, or a program manager, Mr. Winston Holton, the Mr. at Clemson.edu would work. And I also would encourage anyone that wants a opinion or assessment, perception outside of the two of us or directly our program, they can contact our founding dean, Dr. George Peterson, the College of Education, and get that perspective. There could be that you have deans out there that want to hear from another dean. You might have presidents out there that are interested in their institution being part. We encourage presidents to contact President Clements and talk and ask him about Call Me Mister. If you are a state official and you want to understand where the position of the program with the perspective of the program in the state may be, they can contact the state legislature and talk to them about Call Me Mister. 22 years affords us that kind of level of trust and credibility, so that, and we're not at all shy or fearful about anybody's wanting to gain any information in perspective about Call Me Mister.
And you can also find us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at the Call Me Mister. And again, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find any kind of updated information and material, highlights and celebrations that we usually like to share throughout social media standpoint. One of the things before we wrap it up, and I would just like to add, again, in 2000, Dr. Jones stated that we started with the three HBCU schools in the state of South Carolina. And to be on this journey 20 plus years, 21 plus years, we never imagined that we would have at least 28 partners in the state of South Carolina currently that we're affiliated, and that's 2-year schools, 4-year institutions, just simply in the state of South Carolina. And nationally, we've been able to expand to 10 states, additional states outside of South
I'll call
Carolina,
you right back. I'll call you right back.
nationally. And that includes 15 universities from a national scene beyond the state of South Carolina. And so we're just excited to be able to be in this particular position at this particular point, but we are just even more excited what we're working on currently, and we call it the Call Me Mister 2.0, where we're planning so many different things and innovative plans to really find ourselves in a position for 20 more plus years and continued expansion.
Excellent. That's fantastic.
Well, Dr. Roy Jones and Mr. Mark Joseph from the Call Me Mister program, thank you so much for joining us today on Productive Disruption, and we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
gentlemen.
And thank you enough. Much appreciated.
Thank you.